Okay, my friends, let's begin reviewing for your test on what day? Tuesday, right? So I don't see you Monday. See you on Tuesday. Okay? And it is over the first half of this list. So let's jump in. CNS and PNS. What is CNS? What does it stand for? Central nervous system, right? And PNS is peripheral. I'm not sure why you wouldn't bring in the class, but sure. Yeah, you can do it. Central, peripheral, right? Central is with which pieces? The brain and the spinal cord. Though technically the brain stem extends and becomes the spinal cord. So that wasn't totally incorrect. But brain and spinal cord. So you have to stop talking while I'm teaching because it's being recorded now. I appreciate it. And peripheral nervous system, you have two pieces, right? Sensory and motor. One going into the brain, one going from the brain, right? The motor you can divide into two pieces, the somatic and the autonomic. Somatic being I can actually consciously bend my elbow. I can control that. Whereas automatic, right? I cannot.
The somatic nerves only work with skeletal muscles.
They do, yes sir. And they are sending the signal for those skeletal muscles to contract. Whereas the autonomic nervous system would be smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, the glands, those kind of things. Yes, ma'am?
What did you say about going to
That the sensory division is taking information to the brain, whereas the motor division is taking the signal from the brain away to do something with, right? To move, to provide some sort of action. Okay? So those are our pieces for that. We move to neuroglial cells and their functions. This is this lovely picture here, talking about astrocytes and oligodendrocytes and ependymal cells and microglial cells. And there's one more that I can't remember. What's the, instead of an oligodendrocyte, what is it? Yeah, the myelin sheaths, that's they produce, but there's two of them that both produce myelin sheaths that I can't. Schwann cells, thank you. Thank you. So remember that oligodendrocytes. Shh. And which is in which place? Because again, they both do the same function. They both produce myelin, these oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells. Which one is central nervous system and which one is peripheral? Schwann is PNS, right? So that would be the away from the center, not the brain and spinal cord, right? And then oligodendrocytes are in the CNS. The microglial, these are the guys that are the phagocytize, right? The bacteria or the waste products. Shh. Astrocytes provide support. That's their main function, right? They do a couple other things, but
Do they send electrical signals too?
they do not.
They're just
Yep, these are all support. That's what neuroglial is. They're like the support pieces for the neurons. And then the ependymal cells, these are the ones that line the fluid-filled cavities. Does it say produce CNS too? I can't remember what it says there. Yeah. No, just covering. Good, okay, they're not actually producing it. Good. So are you with me? These are the support cells. The neurons, which of course is the next picture, and the next piece from here, that common nerve structure. This is a diagram you should be familiar with. This is the main part, right? So this is the actual thing doing the work. This is the basketball team that's actually on the court, and these guys are the coaches and the athletic director and the scoreboard operator. And are you with me? All the support things you need. Okay? Three main pieces: dendrites, cell body, axon. Dendrites receive the signal from a different nerve. So they're reaching out toward other axons And once the signal gets to them, it filters down through into the axon. Sorry, guys, there's just a ton of this, and you'll hear it all. Okay? I need you to stay with me. A pinched nerve would be where those spinal nerves are coming out from the spine, either a muscle or a piece of the disc, or there's a number of things that can cause it, but it gets caught. Because you remember, my skeleton's in the other room, but it's a very small little opening where those guys come out of the spinal column. So just irritation that's happened there. What are these yellow guys that are here? Those are the myelin sheaths, okay, done by the oligodendrocytes and the Schwann cells. And these little spaces between them, what do we call those? The nodes of Ranvier, right? And so this is where the electrical signal is conducted quickly just through those spots. It doesn't have to go through the myelin. It jumps over top of them, right? And you get a much quicker conduction. A synapse is the next piece, but I don't think it's the next picture. Here's the synapse. And we spent the whole class period where you were going through those pieces, right? As far as how that works. Signals coming from the brain down the axon, reaches that synaptic knob, that ending part of the axon, causes those synaptic vesicles to release that neurotransmitter, right? Neurotransmitter crosses the synaptic cleft and reaches those little receptors on the other side, the postsynaptic neurotransmitter receptors. And once they react there, that basically sends the signal to this other dendrite, right? That's what this is another dendrite on the bottom here. Or it could be an actual, like a muscle or a gland or whatever's doing the action. Sending it and saying, hey, the brain wants you to do your work. If you're a neuron, continue on, fire the process down the rest of the nerve. If you're a cell that's doing something, well, do what you're meant to do. If you're a muscle, contract. If you're a gland, produce your hormone. Are you with me? And again, that is covered nicely in your textbook, and the synapse is there on page 222 is where that diagram is. And again, that would be a very nice little short answer essay question to be able to explain that process. No, that one I won't have you label. I will not have you label that one. Thanks for asking, because it does talk about that diagram there. Okay? Any questions there? Not trying to rush you, just working our way through this. Next, we are on to resting and action potential. So on page 224 and 227, talking about how that is conducted. The point being is that you have positive ions and negative ions. The negative ones stay inside the neuron. The positive, potassium and sodium, move back and forth between outside and in. Mostly, there's more outside than there are inside. So the inside stays negative. You remember the number? Like how much negative is it? About minus 70, right? That's its resting potential. It's just waiting. It's not actually firing. It's just waiting in anxious anticipation. And then a signal comes. If the signal reaches the threshold, right? If it's strong enough, that minus 55 is the threshold. If it's strong enough to make it react, then boom, it goes. That's where you've got these pumps that start working, right? Flooding that inside with that sodium. You start bringing that sodium in, and that depolarizes the neuron. It changes it from a negative to a positive, right? Yes?
So what is this?
This is an action potential. We're talking about how that signal is sent down the nerve.
Okay, so if it doesn't meet threshold,
Then it won't fire.
will something happen when you feel it?
No, not necessarily. No. This is just, like we give the example of beating on Daniel until he finally actually does something. Yeah, no, there's no reaction. It's a signal, but it's not enough, because realize we get signals from the brain all the time. And it's just whether or not we respond to them. Yeah. Okay? So it depolarizes all the way up to, what did we say? It was plus 30, wasn't it? That's as positive it gets. So many of those positives come in, it overwhelms the negatives. But then, very quickly, the pumps reset, right? It pushes that sodium back out, and now you're back to your resting potential. You're back at that minus 70, ready for the next time the brain says, again, send it again, do it again. Okay? So being able, again, short answer-wise, being able to walk through that process of what happens in the neuron with the numbers, with the ions, moving it along. Yes, ma'am? Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, are there times when a signal is sent that we don't respond to that we should? I think that there are some neurological conditions or some problems like that would be what the condition is. The brain sending the signal and the muscle's not responding or the nerve's not responding. So yes, in a typical normal person, I wouldn't think so. Unless you were totally distracted by something else, or let's say the adrenaline, like these guys in war who get shot and they don't even feel the pain. They keep doing all they're doing, and then they realize, oh my goodness, my intestines are hanging out. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that would be that these things are overriding those signals. It's just choosing to ignore it. Yeah. Good question. Okay. Moving on to all or nothing response. That's basically that thought that if a signal fires, let me go to the actually previous picture. If it fires, it's going to cause the whole thing to fire. The whole neuron is going to pass it all the way down. If Daniel reacts, he's going to react. Brenda's going to follow him, right? And just down the road, right? You can't have one thing react and not everything react. Convergence, divergence. Two neurons coming together, that would be convergence into one. Divergence is one neuron that's splitting and sending signals to two separate neurons. Continuing on, reflex arcs. Shh, stay with me, friends. Here is your reflex loop, right? You have a receptor that sends up into the sensory nerve or through the sensory nerve to the central nervous system. Now, normally that signal goes all the way up to the brain, right? And then the brain says, hey, do this, and it sends it back. But in a reflex, it skips the brain. It goes right into the motor neuron and causes the effect. And the ones we've been speaking about, the two examples that your textbook gave very nicely were the patellar reflex or the knee-jerk reflex. I knock that patellar tendon, sends the signal up, and then right here it makes that junction, not going up the spinal cord to the brain, just straight back down the motor neuron, causes that quadricep muscle to contract. And the second example they gave was that withdrawal reflex. Stepping on a tack, signal goes up, and you see here there's that interneuron that's connecting that sensory to the motor and sends a signal right back down. Ooh, lift your foot, quick, no, stop, don't step on that, right? Same thing when you touch a hot stove. Ooh, it just pulls it back without you even thinking about it. Any questions there? Hopefully this is all old hat for you. We've certainly been on this for a bit of time. Meninges. 29 we're done, right? Good, we're doing fine. Meninges. Those are those thick layers that are over top of the brain, in between the cranium, the skull, and the brain, the cerebrum. 3 pieces. The most superficial is which one? The dura mater. Good. And then the next one is the arachnoid mater. And then the most deep is the pia. The pia mater is conformed to the brain. It's basically like a film that's on the brain itself, on the cerebrum. But in between the pia and the arachnoid, what is it that we find? Subarachnoid space, which contains the cerebral spinal fluid. Okay? Yes, ma'am. I'm not going to quiz you on this diagram. I won't put this on the test, but again, you should be comfortable with the pieces that we just talked about. Yeah. Good question. Okay. And what's the function of those meninges? Protection, right? They're protecting that brain, giving it that nice cushion layer of fluid. Since, your brain is kind of important. Mildly, slightly important. Okay? At least for some of us. Spinal cord, right? Showing you the picture that, yes, those meninges do extend down into the spinal cord, not just simply around the brain themselves. You can see the three right here. And you see that spinal cord fits right into that vertebral foramen in the middle of the spine, of your I can't think of the word I want for those. The vertebrae. Thank you. So here's that spinal cord moving all the way down from the brain, all the way down to about L1, L2 in your lumbar spine. Here's a picture, cross-section of that spinal cord. You see the white matter on the outside here. The yellow stuff versus the gray matter, which is that lovely, what kind of shape? Yeah, like a butterfly, right? And the white matter is what versus the gray matter? Like what makes it up? It's myelinated, right? The white matter has myelin. That's why it's that whitish, yellowish color. And the gray is unmyelinated. Okay? It is. You're correct. Yeah, doesn't have to go, there's not much distance it needs to be traveling there. So yeah, not as important to send that signal as quickly. We talked about the spinal cord having these tracts, these ascending and descending tracts. Ascending would be going from the bottom to the top, right? To ascend, to move up. So what kind of signal is on an ascending track? Reception, the sensory, right? And going down from the brain, the descending tracks would be which? The motor. You with me? And again, those of you that are going on to a future in medicine, you'll learn. There are lots of these very specific. You see all these different colors that are here. There are tons of these different tracks, and they each do different things. So you'll learn all about those in the future. So let me just make sure we hit all the pieces here. White and gray matter, what makes them up? The shape of the gray matter. Central canal. You did forget the central canal. That is that piece right in the middle. Right here. Central canal. And what's in that central canal? Some kind of fluid. Yeah. Yeah, that's cerebral spinal fluid. Definitely. Definitely. Okay. Moving on, the brain anatomy is this diagram. Oops, wrong one. This one. And I think you're pretty comfortable as far as what that entails. Your skull on the outside, the cerebellum is the gray matter. Gyruses and sulcuses. You're comfortable with the difference between these guys? Gyrus is the mountain, sulcus is the valley. Right? So this is the G, that's the S. Brainstem has those three pieces, right? Midbrain being the most superior, pons, medulla oblongata. Brainstem becomes the spinal cord as it exits out that foramen magnum. Cerebellum, that little brain, it smooths out your motions. It's about control. That's what its main function. We'll talk much more about functions for the next piece. Any questions there? And of course, last but not least, is that functions diagram. So knowing the lobes, and then knowing the specific functions. Not just the general functions I gave you for today's quiz, but the specific functions for those areas. Yes, ma'am? Uh-huh. No. Just what's here. Just knowing the pieces that are here for spinal cord. Yep. Yes, ma'am? It does exert influence over those signals. Yes. It doesn't necessarily pass through it, but it does exert. The signals all go through that brainstem and out. But yeah, it does. Yeah. Now it's, like I said, the tip of our finger we're talking about in this thing. But its basic role is that as those signals are leaving the brain, yeah, it just makes them nice and smooth and not jerky, and because it takes a lot of coordination, like to take your finger and touch your nose, and that's the cerebellum. If you have a cerebellum issue, you have a stroke there, your motion is very jerky, and you may be able to find your nose, but it's not easy to do. All right? Questions there? Okie dokie.
You answered this already, but each side of the brain has the same function.
It does. In generally, yes. Yeah, in general. Okay, I'm going to stop there.